What's up, folks? Nate here, Two Wheel Dyno Works. We're back on the dyno today with our 2025 Honda Transalp, and today we're going to be talking about and showing you guys the performance differences between the high mount exhaust systems available for these bikes and the low mount or standard mount exhaust systems available for them as well. So today we've still got the Acura header installed on our bike, but this time we have fitted the back half of the exhaust system, or the slip-on, with a MIV high mount. Now on these bikes, and many other middleweight twins, folks go with the high mount systems over the low mount for a number of reasons. A lot of it's aesthetics, but the single biggest factor here from a logical standpoint is that the high mounts give you significantly more ground clearance for technical off-road riding than the low mount or standard mount systems do. They're simply another foot to 2 feet up in the air over the standard mount location, so you're just not as likely to bang them on trees and rocks and whatever else you're bound to find when you're out in the woods. But obviously getting one of these exhaust systems into the high mount location versus the standard mount location, which is pretty much in line with the end of the collector there, involves some additional bends just to get it that much further off the ground. And those additional bends in the piping do create quite a bit of a difference in terms of overall performance, because they change exhaust pulse velocity quite dramatically throughout much of the rev range. So before we dive into how the bike performs right now as it sits on our dyno, let's just quickly recap how this thing performed in bone stock trim and what we were able to accomplish with our custom ECU mapping without making any physical changes to the bike, and then how it performs with a standard or low mount full system in place, so then we can accurately compare the difference between the low mount and the high mount system. Now, we've obviously covered all of this before in prior videos as we've gone through our testing and tuning on our new 25 Transalp, so I will make this as brief as I possibly can. The red line there on the dyno graph is our bike in 100% bone stock trim. It made 75.7 horsepower and 49.7 pound-feet of torque. There's huge restrictions at the top end, there's big restrictions off the bottom end. The fueling is generally screwed up, the ignition timing sucks, and the throttle-by-wire restrictions are crazy. So with all of that smoothed out and no physical changes made to the bike, power comes up to 84.5 horsepower and 52.8 pound-feet of torque, which is the blue line you see there on the screen. Now, the green line on the screen is the exact same bike, but with a slip-on installed. That is a low-mount slip-on from Akrapovic, and power comes up about 2 horsepower to 86.5, and torque comes out about half a pound-foot to 53.3. With just a slip-on, the gains are very minuscule, but when you install a aftermarket header, which in this case is the Acura header to pair the Acura slip-on, you end up with the orange line, which comes out to a peak of 88.5 horsepower and 56 pound-feet of torque, and you can see that there's significant performance improvements pretty much everywhere from 5,000 RPM all the way to the limiter compared to how the bike was with the stock header in place. Whew, okay. I tried to cover that as fast as I possibly could for those of you that have already seen our other testing and tuning videos, so if that was way too fast for those of you that have not seen them, I don't blame you, but you should definitely go ahead and watch the prior testing and tuning videos I've already posted for this platform so you can better understand those gains in something a little bit longer than the 90 seconds that I just blitzed through those graphs with. But now that we know where we started and how the bike performs with a full exhaust system and our custom ECU mapping in the low mount position, let's go ahead and see how it performs with a full exhaust in the high mount position. So the red lines are how the bike performs as it sits on our dyno right now, with the Acura header installed, the MIV high mount slip-on in place, and our custom ECU mapping optimized for the airflow characteristics of that setup. The blue line is our custom ECU mapping for the full Acura, with obviously the full Acura installed, being the low mount for comparison's sake here. Now you can see that the high mount, again, the red line, is significantly or noticeably higher in both horsepower and torque until about 5,000 RPM. After 5,000 RPM, though, everything is flipped around. Those bend angles create significant restrictions, so all of a sudden you are losing power compared to a low mount from about 5,200 or so, all the way until just past 8,000 RPM. And that is where you're doing the majority of your riding on these bikes. There is simply significant power and torque losses to the tune of about 3 horsepower and 3 pound-feet of torque there in the mid-range with a high mount compared to a low mount. And then yes, at the top end, technically the high mount makes like half a horsepower more, but that is honestly just because we don't have the baffle installed in our MIV. With it installed, this whole thing looks actually even worse because you're losing about 2 horsepower due to the exhaust restriction that the baffle poses and about 2 pound-feet of torque. So this is as comparable of a graph as I can give you to show you a fully unrestricted low mount exhaust system with our tuning in place versus a fully unrestricted high mount exhaust system with our tuning in place. Now there's two primary reasons that I bring this topic up and really want folks to understand it when they're going to go ahead and purchase an exhaust system for their Transalp. And the first is that obviously there's significant performance differences between a high mount and a low mount. So you absolutely need to be aware of those performance differences if you're looking to maximize performance with your choice of exhaust system. Now, obviously, if you need a high mount because you're going to be one of those folks riding these in very technical situations, then it is what it is. There's no way around that. But if you're just buying it potentially for aesthetic purposes and you don't understand that it won't flow quite as well as a low mount system, maybe this information might make you reconsider your choice. The second reason I also bring up the difference here between the high mount and the low mount system is that there are dramatic changes in terms of the fueling needs from one system to another. Right down here at the very bottom of the rev range, where the high mount does actually outperform one of the low mount systems just slightly, there is a big difference in the fueling need compared to a low mount system for those gains to be safely had. You're talking about, in some spots down there, right around 3,500 RPM, a 15% increase in fuel volume to get to the same target AFR with the high mount versus the low mount. And conversely, in the mid-range, where obviously there's even more significant differences, the fueling is equally different from one system to another. And unless somebody has gone through the ridiculous amounts of intake and exhaust specific testing and tuning, like we have here at Two Wheel Dyno Works on these bikes, they would never know that, which is why, as I've shown on the prior generation Transalp, the fuel mapping is terrible from a lot of our competitors that also offer ECU flashing or ECU tuning services for this platform. Now, it's also important not to get a little too lost in the weeds here when you're comparing the high mounts versus the low mounts for your specific needs or your aesthetic desires, because ultimately, with our custom ECU mapping in place, as you can see compared to the green line, which is how the bike is in bone stock trim, the improvements are absolutely insane regardless of what setup you go with. The bike truly won't even feel remotely like the same machine you rolled out of the dealership's showroom floor with either setup in place and our custom ECU mapping in your ECU. And honestly, even though those comparison graphs look absolutely ridiculous when you look at the stock performance versus either setup's performance with our mapping in place, they still don't actually do the transformation justice. Because truly, this cannot be understated, these bikes feel so much better to ride with how much smoother and stronger they run with proper tuning in place for your setup. So if you're looking to get our custom ECU mapping for your bike's specific intake and exhaust combination, head over to twowheeldynoworks.com, purchase our mail-in ECU flashing service for your new Transalp on our site for $349.99, ship it to us, and we'll get it flashed and shipped right back to you the very same day that we receive it. And as always, if you have any questions whatsoever about one exhaust versus another, or intake modifications or tuning or whatever it is on your new Transalp, please do not hesitate to email us at support@twowheeldynoworks.com. I personally answer any and all tech support questions every single day we're open here at the shop, and both myself and my staff are always truly happy to help.